Okay, good morning. Welcome here to this panel, the challenges of financing urban infrastructure. We have a wonderful panel with us here today. We have Kristtian Rada. Kristtian represents IFC, the private sector arm of the World Bank, and he's responsible for cities in Latin America. And we have José Antonio Teixeira. He's the innovation director for the city of Santander, and he'll share with us the Smart City Santander project. We also have Professor Stephen Goldsmith from Harvard University. He also happens to be Vice Mayor of New York during Bloomberg, and also the Mayor of Indianapolis. Lots of experiences in how to finance needed urban infrastructure. And last but not least, we have with us Arturo Buenaventura. He's the Corporate Planning Director for Abengoa. Abengoa is an infrastructure developer known for very creative and innovative financing mechanisms. Financing urban infrastructure has become a very challenging matter for our cities, as it is today. Now we're talking about trying to migrate from a traditional way of managing a city to a smart way of managing a city, and that even poses greater challenges. No? Sometimes, at least in the cities. By the way, I'm Ellis Juan. I'm responsible for the Emerging and Sustainable Cities Initiative at the Inter-American Development Bank. Latin America is my area of expertise. I was saying that sometimes, even in Latin America, in our cities, we still have problems just on the traditional way of managing a city. We still have a lot of challenges in how to better treat the water, how to better dispose of our solid waste, how to better manage our mobility challenges and so on with a traditional way of doing things. Imagine if we wanted to migrate. Nevertheless, technology would allow us to better manage our cities, and would allow us to probably manage it also in a most cost-effective way. No? Now, to be able to do this, we need to be able to finance this migration. No? We need to access financial markets. Our cities have tremendous challenges on this. For instance, in Latin America, in average, the credit rating of our cities is probably BBB in local currency, which is very difficult for them to access independently needed long-term debt. As you need for this kind of investments, you're talking about 15, 20, 25 years long-term financing. No? So very important, no, that these cities can really not only migrate to be able to use better and more smart technology, but at the same time be able to build a much stronger fiscal instance, that they can be really much better partners to the private sector, so they can really then work together and mobilize the needed private capital. In terms of how will the process work for the panel, no? We'll have an initial 5-minute introduction by each speaker, then a couple of rounds of questions, one to each, and then hopefully we'll have time to open up to a more broader discussion with you, with the audience. No? So with this, I will start with the introduction by Kristtian Rada. Kristtian.
Good morning. My name is Kristtian Rada. I am responsible for the cities program in Latin America in IFC. IFC is the one of the institution as part of the World Bank Group. And thank you, Ellis, for the invitation. Just an introduction. The objective of the IFC cities program is to help some municipalities, the largest municipalities in Latin America, to finance the urban infrastructure in 5 focus areas. The first one is energy, including some aspects like energy efficiency, water, waste management, transport, and smart cities. For us, smart cities include all the ICT technologies, communications, and how we can help the municipalities to improve the technologies and communication in the city. In terms of country focus, Next year, we will focus only in 5 countries in LAC, Mexico, Colombia, Peru, Chile, and Brazil. Why we will focus in these countries? Because the role of the IFC is to promote the private sector intervention in sustainable cities. As you know, in LAC, many municipalities, they have been working in sustainable programs for several years. But the role of the private sector is not easy to understand for some mayors. But based on our experience, the idea is how we can promote the private sector role through for example, the PPP, the public-private partnership, to develop the most important infrastructure projects in the city. So this is a draft, the first objective of the program in LAC. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristtian. José Antonio.
Sí. Welcome, everyone. Firstly, let me thank the organizers and especially my friend Ellis Juan for giving us the opportunity to present you our activity around the Smart City, Santander Smart City ecosystem. And first time, I'm going to talk about the Smart City project. I think, no, Ellis? Okay. When I came to Santander from the private sector in 2012, both the mayor and me, we wanted to create a new model of the city, a new model of the city management, and also we wanted to create an improvement of the all service around the city to generate a new model, as I told after. Excuse me for my English, okay? Within this context, as a part of the general project of the city, we developed an innovation plan. This innovation plan was an important plan for us that we established 3 main lines in this. The first line was a smart city concept. A smart city concept. In this line, we have been working in all lines, in all service, introducing ICT in all service around the city to improving the management of these services. In second line, we have working in the Santander Open Innovation. With Santander Open Innovation, we tried to generate an ecosystem for the entrepreneurs, for the companies, for the citizens, to generate new services, to generate new models of the new product, new models of the new products, etc. Okay, and the third line, I think, is the most important line. I think for us was a public administration, because we don't have a smart city if we don't have a robust administration. This is the most important thing. If we don't have, I think that everyone have to spend 1 year within the public administration to understand everything. I think all these ingredients were the most important thing for implement our infrastructure currently, because we have deployed around the city currently 20,000 sensors in all services: Smart Santander, Smart Water, Smart Waste, and public traffic. And recently, we have called it a very important project in energy efficiency. that we are going to implement it. Around 3,000 sensors.
Thank you.
For that, currently we have in the city three kinds of sensors: static sensors, dynamic sensors. Dynamic sensors located in the all vehicles around the city, in vehicles in the services, in the vehicles on the buses, on the taxis, in the vehicles of the police, in the vehicles of the waste service, and we are collecting a lot of data for environment of the city. Okay, we already have dynamic static sensors around the city using infrastructure, the urban infrastructure, and also we have participatory sensing through the one app page of the city, in that the citizen can sorry.
No.
Okay.
Good.
And oh, sorry. Because I extend my explanation.
Correct, yeah. I think we can come back to Smart City Santander later on the questions, no?
Okay.
So now, Stephen.
Okay.
Thanks. Let me just make a few comments. I've been involved in infrastructure finance and public-private partnerships for 30 years as a public official and as a consultant to public officials and as a professor who teaches it. Let me just make a couple slightly different observations. So in the U.S. market, there's a lot of private money interested in being invested in public infrastructure, and bankers can't understand why that money is not being invested. But to the public officials, it's pretty clear why it's not being invested, because they have no way to pay it back, right? So just because it's private money and not public money that's loaned to a jurisdiction, then there has to be some ability to pay it back. So I think that the real issue today, right, is focusing on where there are new areas of value created through the public infrastructure that will help resolve that that problem in part, right? So we're going to hear a little bit about water in a second, but the U.S., I do more of my work is in the U.S., a little bit in Latin America, but in the U.S., the cities are facing very large environmental mandates, right? So if you ask about how to finance those the solutions to those environmental mandates, a logical answer is, well, if we could have our water utilities and wastewater utilities operated more efficiently, that would free up operating dollars, which could then be used for debt repayment, right? And our experience is that even in the very best run U.S. cities like New York City's wastewater, or even Indianapolis when I was there, that private sector participation, and you know, we can define participation as outsourcing or strategic alliances or new ways of doing things, but that those savings end up to being about 20% of the operating revenues of even operating costs of even the best wastewater facilities. So now you've got a reason to invest in infrastructure, cleaner air, cleaner water, and a source to help pay it back on the operational efficiencies. And that's the same thing that is driving public-private partnerships on infrastructure for street lights or other sustainable mechanisms like energy uses in buildings and the like. So one issue here is how do we use the best of the private sector's operating skills to drive efficiencies in public entities that will then reduce their operating costs and allow them to sustain the level of borrowing that's necessary. And then just lastly, to take off on your comments, another way to think about this, obviously we're here at this Smart City Congress because we're increasingly defining the platforms for smart cities as critical pieces of infrastructure, right? The infrastructure is not just water, it's not just roads. We consider that the support of high-speed wireless and the like is necessary for commerce and education. Well, if that's the case, then the same model applies. So you look at this and say, all right, how would we pay for this? Well, we could look at New York City's Link NYC, where 7,500, this is in the New York City booth out here, 7,500 old payphones are now interactive street-level kiosks where the ad revenues will pay for the city to offer high-speed gigabit wireless throughout all of New York, from the advertising paid for just in part of New York, right? So this is a model that says where can we drive additional value? Similarly, once we have savings from or new revenues, then you can look at streetlight savings on energy and other platforms that could be platforms for wireless on which then sensors can be located. The only point of this is that how we bundle the infrastructure investments is really critical, and we can bundle those in street lights, we can bundle them in street level kiosks. A city could integrate those solutions together, but each one of those has a set of sources, right? Energy savings or revenues, and a set of uses, sensors for managing safety or sensors for managing mobility. So as we move from kind of old infrastructure to new, they actually don't, there's not a sharp division between them. They're connected, and they're connected along the lines of creative public project financing, creative operational excellence, well-written service level agreements so that the quality of the service is good, but then thinking more creatively about new sources of assets. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Arturo.
Hello. Hello. Can you hear me? Yes. Well, first of all, I would like to spend a few words in introducing myself. I am Arturo Buenaventura. I am Strategy and Corporate Development responsible for the water division of Abengoa. Abengoa is an international company that provides innovative technological solutions for sustainability in both the energy and water sectors. Since I am more in the water division, I will talk today about water, and I would like to share within this introduction with you my view on what the big challenges of the water are. So first of all, we all know that we have an increasingly growing population together with improving the standard of living. It comes to the point that more and more water is needed, and at the same time with our industrial development we are also polluting some of our natural resources. On top of that, we know that all people try to live in big cities, and cities are becoming larger, which also introduces more difficulties in delivering good quality water and in terms of also in quantity to all that people. And on top of that, we are all into a climate change situation, which also with extreme events makes things a bit more difficult, if I may say. So at the end of the day, we need to find a way to deliver and to ensure water in quality and quantity, and for doing so is where Abengoa can play a role. We have the three things I think we need to do, which are first of all improve the way we manage water and push for conservation measures. Second, we need to make sure that we treat all our effluents, both municipal and industrial, to make sure that we don't pollute our natural resources. And third, we need to bring alternative or additional water resources to cover those needs. So I was saying Abengoa is where it can play a role because we do have technology for managing water at level of river basin and also big infrastructures, water conveyance infrastructure. We have technology for wastewater treatment, so for the second point. And finally, we have membrane technology for water treatment reclamation, water reclamation and desalination for those alternative water resources. And to conclude this introduction, We provide design, build, operation, finance of this kind of water infrastructures. And I think that to come to the point of today's discussion, I would like to say we also believe that public and private partnership for water infrastructures is probably the best model, because it brings together the good part of the public and the good part of the private side. Thank you.
Thank you, Arturo. Kristtian, Stephen made a very strong case about use of innovation to finance, no? And the difficulties that public sector officials have when accessing financial markets. As responsible of IFC in Latin America to lend to cities, now we learn only 5 countries that you're going to be specializing. According to you, what are the 3 key elements that will define the success of a city accessing long-term financial markets?
Thanks, Ellis. To support the implementation of sustainable programs in a city, IFC can use two instruments, 2 angles. The first one is subnational finance. We can lend directly with the municipality. No? Sometimes we need a strong support from the municipality to demonstrate the financial capability to receive the finance directly. And sometimes we can use a different instrument, investing directly with the private sector. As I have mentioned earlier, we focus the program in 5 areas, and the municipality can identify the priorities for the municipality in urban infrastructure. The objective of the program is to create or to identify a pipeline of a specific infrastructure project, the largest project in each city, to help the municipalities to convert this pipeline of projects in bankable projects. So if we use the subnational finance instrument, we need a strong support from the municipality in terms of financial instruments. And if we work directly with the private sector, the idea is to support through equity on loans to the private sector intervention in the city. No? But based on our experience, Ellis, we can work with a select group of cities in Latin America to support this kind of project, because medium or small cities, they need to strengthen the financial statements as a first step, and then they can attract the commercial capital. You know? But the idea of the program as the first step is to focus in these select countries, and for this reason, the idea is to select in the largest, focus the program in the largest cities in these countries. But just to clarify, if we receive a request or letter of interest in Honduras or Guatemala, we can support any project in these countries. But based on our experience, the city needs some conditions in terms of financial and technical capabilities to support this project.
Good. Thank you, Kristtian. I think he illustrates that very well, the challenges of intermediate cities, particularly in emerging markets. José Antonio, Santander is probably by now a model case, a success of a city that has been migrating from a traditional way of managing a city to a smart way of managing a city, no? And you were describing that initially in your introduction. And you are now also using a little bit of Stephen push on innovation. You're using very innovative financing now to actually advance the city into the energy efficiency goals, no? And you have a huge project now to basically replace all the public lighting and all the lighting also of the public buildings, no? Could you tell us a little bit about how you're financing that?
Yes. In first, I would like to say something. You can deploy a lot of sensors around the city to collect the data for every services, but But also you need a platform to generate analytics models to feed then new applications, new business models, new systems to improving the services. Well, this is very important because you don't end your work. You also you only have deployed sensors around the city. You need the platform. I think the platform is the most important piece of the smart city ecosystem. Okay. This is the first thing, but your question with our energy efficiency project, I think that we will get saving at least 65% of the consumption, current consumption. Okay. The companies will need to have an investment around the 15 millions. They will have to change, to replace or to upgrade the lampposts around the city. Currently, we have 22,000 lampposts in the city. In this tender, the companies will have to change or upgrade, depend of the case, the lampposts to LED technology, and then they will have to implement a point-to-point system to control, to generate a control of the lampposts and to improve the maintenance of these lampposts. And then, excuse me, problem of the direct. Okay, my smartphone. Okay, and then the companies also will have to implement a platform to generate analytic models of the energy efficiency. For that, I think the tender, the city will spend at least 45 million to pay the savings, and I think at least the city council will save 1.4 million euros for year with this contract. I think that this is the most important contract that the city council have tendered in the city, and we are very excited with this project.
So in essence, a service contract, long-term, 15 years, that is going to be paid on with the savings from the energy consumption, and the contractor will bear the responsibility not only to invest in the new technology, but also in the maintenance and the data generation. Stephen, I think the innovative example of the City of New York in accomplishing in giving to the citizens, full access to internet, a full Wi-Fi city, and to pay this on the basis of the advertising revenue generating is obviously a model that one could think could be replicated in many other cities. I'm sure there's a benchmark there of population size that you will need. What other innovative mechanisms have you come across in your experience in New York and Indianapolis, or now as a consultant or professor?
Well, there's a range of innovations that are possible, right? So you mentioned one with the energy savings contracts. Another way to think about this is, does the public entity want to buy a service, or do they want to invest in infrastructure, right? Do they want to have energy furnished to their buildings, or do they want to purchase the energy? Do they want to maintain their buildings? They want to maintain their streetscapes. So one way is to think about the relationship between the operating contract and the ownership. Another is, like when we were in New York City, so we thought, well, how do we create value? So we took pictures of all the rooftops to see which ones could be solar or wind, right? So where did we own an asset that was undervalued? Where do we own a piece of property that had a higher value? And the goal here, right, is to create a set of revenues that help the political entity accomplish an aspiration that it has. So there may be multiple sources of innovation. It could be in the wastewater business that wastewater business is a highly innovative business today. And New York began to examine where could it produce energy through its waste stream, right? How does that produce new value? So whether we're looking at ad revenues, operational efficiencies, underutilized assets, or a contract with the private sector to manage a current operating expenditure which produces savings, all of those are innovations. But in the end, I think it's important to point out that these things work when the political champion can make an argument in behalf of something valuable for his or her citizens, right? Because these things that all involve disruptive change. The definition of innovation is disruptive change, and that works only when one can paint a picture of, okay, now every citizen is going to have high-speed internet wireless. Every citizen is going to have a higher quality of service level from their city. So getting the framework right and getting the strategy right allows the innovation then to drive the infrastructure investments.
Arturo, you recently won a very important water concession, a concession to source all the water for the city of San Antonio in Texas. This is a very creative PPP mechanism, but you're also using a very creative financing, long-term financing mechanism for this. Could you please elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. Well, first of all, I would like to put in context the project first.
Volume, please, volume.
Okay, much better. San Antonio is a city in Texas that is about 1.7 million inhabitants. It's a big city and has a long tradition in an innovative mechanisms of management of water. They really know what water scarcity means because they have suffering from it for a long time. They really have a very advanced model. They do reclamation, water reclamation. They have big conservative water mechanisms too. But at the end of the day, they rely on Edwards Aquifer, where they pump out about 80% of the water they use in the city. This aquifer is also have also demands from other cities, and at the end of the day, it tends to be an environmental issue because they cannot continue stressing the aquifer. So, like 5 years ago, the city of San Antonio decided to start a process, and they request for proposal for new solutions for the problem, for the water challenge. And it was quite innovative again from their side because instead of asking for a specific solution and a price on that, what they request were come out with any solution you may have for this. So it was quite an open request for proposals. 11 consortia presented different options and they shortlisted 4, which they started negotiating with them. So finally, our solution was the one that was selected by the city. And last November, after negotiating the water purchase agreement, we signed the contract. We will be providing more than 150,000 cubic meters per day of drinking quality water to the city of San Antonio for the next 30 years. The city has gone through a very transparent process, and it also requires now to change the tariff of the water tariff in the city, because there are a number of improvements and also investments carrying on, and the increase on the tariff due to the project of Vista Ridge and Abengoa is only going to represent about 1/4 of the increment of the increase in the water tariff. Since last November, we have started to develop the project, which means all the permitting, all the water lease and right of way, also some aquifer studies, and also geothermal, and topographic analysis, and a lot of engineering, and all those costs for this year and next one is now being covered by a bridge loan. And when we close financing, will be like second half of 2016. Then we will have, and coming to the question, we will finance the infrastructure, which is more than 800 million euros through issuing bonds and leveraging ourselves, leveraging the project in the rating that San Antonio has, which is a high investment rating. So we will really be able to get very good and very competitive finance structure for the project, allowing at the end of the day getting a very competitive tariff for the next 30 years.
Thank you. This illustrates very well the challenges of cities that do not have that AAA credit rating that San Antonio has. This is a financing mechanism via capital markets that was able to be put in place because San Antonio has a strong credit quality. Their promise to pay for those cubic meters of water, potable water, that Abengoa will be giving them is very credible. As Kristtian was illustrated the opposite, no? That they have pre-selected some countries and they only work with some cities that have that type of credit rating. We're doing great with time, so I'm going to go through a second round and then I'll open up for discussions for the audience.
It's
Sure.
30 seconds. I mean, hidden in the San Antonio story, at least for the public officials in the room, is another important point, which is if one uses the public RFI or RFP as a solicitation for innovation, too many of the public sector requests are highly prescriptive. But if you say, how can we solve a problem? Like we're doing one now in an airport where instead of saying, you know, how do we handle de-icing? We say, how are we going to handle stormwater runoff? How are we going to handle de-icing? How are we going to handle water conservation? What are your ideas? And then turn that into an RFP. And I think that if you really want innovation, the best way the public sector can do it is ask the private sector for innovative ideas before they write the RFP.
Excellent point. Kristtian, what would you say in your financial study with cities in Latin America? What are your two most successful cases where you have reached financial completion and have really structured a very interesting loan or capital market transaction for a city?
IFC has been working around the world, no, in 40 cities. And IFC has invested 6,000 million in 40 cities around the world.
6 billion.
Yeah. And the idea in the case of Latin America, we have been working with 3 cities, just 3 cities. Medellin in Colombia, in EPM, the utility services company. We have improved all the conditions in energy, water management and waste management in the city. Now Medellin is one of the most important cities in terms of sustainability issues in Latin America. The second example is Bogotá. We have been working with the municipality of Bogotá to improve the massive transport system, Transmilenio, and to implement the electronic payment in Transmilenio for transport. And the last one is Cartagena. We will implement the new massive transport system in Cartagena next year. But based on our experience in Latin America, it's very difficult to work directly with the private sector to improve some specific areas. For example, water. No, in terms of water, there are many issues to implement some specific transaction to the public-private partnership in Latin America. But now we think there are many opportunities in some specific countries, like Colombia. For example, Colombia has changed the regulations to promote PPPs in water. Or Brazil has changed the regulations to promote some specific transaction in waste management. Or Chile has changed the regulation to promote energy efficiency through in cities, in street lightings, new systems to reduce the energy consumption. Or some countries, they have approved green building codes to promote energy efficiency, water conservation in the new buildings. We think now there are many opportunities to promote sustainable cities in Latin America. But our focus will be in some specific countries, like I mentioned, and some specific cities. The idea is to develop some pilot projects to demonstrate the role of the private sector in sustainable cities. When we have the examples, we can replicate these examples around the region, but we need to demonstrate how the public sector can work with the private sector in some specific project. No? For example, in the case of Cartagena, the operators will be private operators. And in the case of Bogota, who is responsible to manage the electronic payments is a private operator. Or in the case of Medellin, is a public utility services company, but we can invest with the public utility company to invest in some specific private operations. So IFC can work with the cities in different ways, in different angles. When we talk about the cities, we are talking for not only the municipality, we can work with the utility services company, or we can work with the regional government. In some specific countries like Mexico or Brazil or Peru or Colombia, sometimes we will work with the regional government to complement a city's urban infrastructure projects.
Thank you, Kristtian. José Antonio, again, on Santander being at the forefront of this migration from a traditional city management to a smart city management. No? I remember Íñigo de la Serna, the mayor, who couldn't be here with us today, unfortunately, when I was visiting them, showing me in his iPhone, no? all these applications where he would touch a button and he will know exactly the bus number 7 at what time that bus was going to pass by this particular stop. Or he will push another button and he will know exactly what was the quality of air in Santander that day and so on. What is next? What is next in Santander in terms of the development of the smart city platform?
In first time in Spain, we have problems with the regulation to implement project using ICT as a means. We as well. We have very problem because I think the regulation is behind to the technicians. Okay, we already have problems. In Santander now, we what to say we don't stand in the project of the sensors because we need currently to implement a smart city platform to collect all data among around the services and then generate the smart city concept and the rules to improve the services and to generate applications to produce a new model to provide these services to the citizens. Where we are generating app applications, applications to service a lot of information, to the citizens because we have worried with the transmit the smart city concept to the benefits to the smart city for the citizens because currently the citizens can't understand what are the benefits for the smart city concept or why why the cities are spending a lot of money in initiative on technicians to improve the services. What are the real benefits to the citizens? But this is this is, I think that this is the true problem that the cities have in the future.
Thank you. Stephen, as a public sector official in very senior positions in both New York and Indianapolis, what are some of the most important lessons that you take with you when trying to make a decision on how to finance a particular intervention, project, improvement of service to the citizens, so on, that you can share with us publicly?
Well, so if you think about your last two questions, right? When this gives me an opportunity to plug my book. Like a year ago, I wrote a book about the use of data in cities. But the title of the book was Responsive Government. It wasn't how to use data in cities. It was called Responsive Government. And I begin to answer your question that way because the first issue is the framework that the public sector will use to build public support for that rationale, right? So do we want to create a more responsive city? We want to create a more sustainable city. We want to create a more reliable water supply. So I do a lot of work with cities around the world advising the cities, and if they don't start with a vision, they can't get to the end, right? The financing is complicated, but it's not nearly as complicated as the politics, right? So that's the first issue. The second issue is, okay, who are the stakeholders and how are they going to be affected, right? What will the current workers think about the investment? Is it good for them or is it bad for them, and how do we handle that relationship as well? And then then you get to the next issue, which is, well, what is it that the city wants to own and control, and what could it allow somebody else to do, right? So does the city want to control the rates of the water, or does it want to do free infrastructure? Does it want to control service level agreements? And so that's the next. And then the last issue, which is the one that, of course, you and your colleagues specialize in, is project finance. And that seems to me to be an issue where almost every city around the world needs a high-quality consultant to advise it, because those are very difficult things. And the question becomes, in that situation, right, what's the best mixture of debt and equity? What is the best way to enhance the credit of the organization? And what's the best way to manage the project itself? Because often the capital costs are, the interest costs are not even as significant as the speed to complete the project, right? The project management experience itself. And even in a city as big as New York City, right, with Mayor Bloomberg and then Mayor de Blasio, a special group handled P3 negotiations, right? Because they were experienced negotiators. And then inside the agencies, somebody handled once the contract was done, the contract monitoring. And then there was a special program management office. And my only point is, the more complicated the project, the more necessary it is to think about being well advised and having somebody with great authority and experience managing the project for the city or state.
That's a very important project. Our experience when working with the cities in Latin America is that the level of institutional and intellectual knowledge of a particular APP sector project between the bidder and the government is so asymmetric, no? That it makes your comment so much more important, no? Arturo, as an investor, not as a banker, but as an investor, when Abengoa looks at a particular project, whether it's in the water sector, in the energy sector, what are sort of the 3-4 critical factors that you're looking at, particularly when you're doing this at the city level?
Yeah, I think I fully agree with Stephen's first comment on his previous remarks. I think the political willingness is the key driver for a project to happen. Together with also the awareness, political awareness also at the government and municipal level of the need for the project. At the end of the day, this means that there's a really need for that infrastructure, whether it is transport, energy, or water, and that they want to build such an infrastructure. Of course, there will be a lot of barriers along the way, but we will be able to overcome all of those, because there will be always a real project behind with the right solution for the specific problem, and financing will be solved, and technological any question from the technology point of sight, it also will be solved. So it all starts with a really political willingness for the project to happen.
Thank you, Arturo. Well, we have with us the largest development bank in the world. We have the innovation director of probably one of the cities that is more far advanced on that. We have someone with all the experience in very complex cities like New York and to a lesser extent Indianapolis. And we have one of the largest infrastructure, private infrastructure developers in the emerging market world. So the floor is open to you. Any questions, you might address it to a particular one or to all, and the microphone is there. And if not, we'll lend you ours. Okay. Don't be shy.
Not at all. My name is Andrew Reynolds. I come from the United States.
A volume, please.
I'm speaking as loud as...
No, sorry, I was referring to the...
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
I wonder if you might also reflect, all of you, as new sources of capital may be identified in the private sector, or particularly in retirement funds, very large, or sovereign wealth funds. And are you individually or collectively, can you speak to those as new sources of revenue or of investment capital? And how does the value proposition figure into that particular attraction? Thank you.
Anyone want to start? No.
My answer tends to be more U.S.-centric. And those funds in the U.S. market have advantages. Early on, U.S. cities and states officials were embarrassed when there would be an investment in infrastructure and it would be flipped by the owner-investor just a few years later for great returns. And that was embarrassing to the public agency. So I think the advantage of the pension fund investments in the U.S., to some extent the sovereign funds, but more importantly the pension funds, is they'll accept slightly lower rates of return, and they're in it to hold the asset for a longer period of time. And I think it's important that, particularly for the operator, but also for the owner, that person, that entity develops a trusted relationship with the public entity. And so I think the longer terms and the slightly lower returns are both beneficial in the U.S. market.
If I may, I will add something on that. We receive a lot of requests from this kind of investment funds, pension funds, because they are willing to participate in water projects. They all believe that water is a key market that will help those funds to get stable revenues in the future. So there's a huge appetite from that side. And I will also give us an example that in a project in the US, by the way, in California, there was several consortia in competition, and it turned to be that one of those consortia was including in their financial structure a pension fund that at the end of the day was very well seen by the public, because when you are talking about water, energy, whatever, you always feel like if somehow any potential revenue on that will at the end of the day come back to the citizens, that will help the loop moving. So I think we will see more and more this kind of funds participating in this kind of PPP projects.
An answer perhaps with a more Latin American flavor. On the pension funds, and even, there's now a lot of private equity, even private investment infrastructure funds dedicated and looking for opportunities. No? On that note, Our sense in Latin America is that still the risk-return equation is not as attractive to them. They're very still concerned in going into a city like Manaus in Brazil, even though the project financials, so the project intrinsic issues might look okay, they're still a bit concerned. On the sovereign wealth funds, particularly the ones from Asia and the Middle East, we're seeing a lot more risk tolerance. Whether it's good or bad, I do not know yet. We'll see, we'll judge that later. But they're starting to look at more risk in places like Latin America, no? Of course, the last 2 years haven't helped us too much because obviously the overall weighted risk of Latin American assets has increased.
Armen Orugian, also from United States. This may come out as a criticism, but I actually just want to...
It's fine. We're criticism. We're open for that.
Want to understand. Now, Kristtian, this is to you, and maybe you can chime in from IDB side as well. You say when you're looking at Latin American cities, you're looking at the large one, you're looking at the health of their credit, credit rating and whatnot. When we're looking at smart urbanization, it's one way for these cities that are already in financial quagmire for them to come out of it. If they can't come to you as a development fund, they can go to the mainstream banking. They're not going to look at them. Private sector is not going to look at them because of the credit rating. What do they do?
Good question. Well, as part of the World Bank Group, we can use different instruments. No? IFC is focused in the private sector operations. No? We can invest directly with the private sector, but the World Bank, as part of the World Bank Group, can support the municipalities, the cities, the regional government to improve some urban issues. No? So at the end of the day, we can combine the efforts from World Bank and IFC as World Bank Group to support the municipalities as a whole. And the idea is to have a strategic city engagements. The idea is not focus only in one or two transactions, one in water, because IFC has been working with cities in 15 years, 20 years, no? The idea now is how we can work with the cities or the regional governments to establish a strategic cities partnerships, to identify pipeline of projects, no, in different areas like energy, waterways, and to change the city. The name of the program is transformational programs around the world. We have selected 11 programs around the world, and city is one of these 11 programs.
The question is the essence of what the panel is about. The question is, if you're a BBB credit rated city in local currency, you need 20-year money to fix your water, fix your mobility, fix your security. How do you go about it? And I think it's a very relevant question. No, if you need a water treatment plan because you are not treating your water, the water is going back to the aquifer, or worse, to the urban river that used to be a very nice environmental asset before. And to be able to do that, you hire a consultant, and the consultant tells you, fine, we're going to structure this off-take contract, and then we're going to beat it out, and you're going to pay 100 pesos for every cubic meter of water disposed. Oh, and the bank says, and the promise to pay the 100 pesos for cubic meter of water disposed is coming from where? From a BBB rated institution? Thank you very much. I give you a year money, maybe 2-year money. So that's the essence of the case. What we're doing, I mean, the sort of view we're taking in the program that we manage, the Emerging and Sustainable Cities Initiative, is that it's going to be very difficult without a sovereign help, a sovereign assistance, to get the financing for that water treatment plan. So we will work with them to try to get the sovereign assistance. But in the meantime, and what I think is at the end what's going to be the way in which these cities can have more financial autonomy and eventually access financial markets, is let's get and work with them in actually improving their fiscal balance, their fiscal sustainability, in issues that are very primitive, issues like collecting and charging the right amount for property taxes. Compared to OECD countries, Latin America only collects a sixth of the property taxes. And that is with a catastrophe, with a property registration system that is outdated probably 30 years in average. So imagine if you update that system, if you use even technology that is readily available off the shelf, you know, like georeference techniques, and then you digitalize the collection of the system, you might increase the property tax revenues by 5 or 6 times in a year, 2 years. And you're not talking about billions of dollars of investment, you talk about $100,000 of investment. So that's the kind of things we are doing and working directly with them. Obviously, you know, they will have an impact medium term, and in the meantime, we need to solve the problem, so we go and try to assist them with our help to try to get sovereign, or try to get a guarantee to be able to mobilize the capital. But your question is at the essence of what this panel is about. Because obviously cities like New York or cities like Sao Paulo are not going to have that challenge. But all the others, which by the way are the ones that are growing, is where the people are moving, those are the ones that are going to have the challenge.
See, one thing,
José Antonio.
in the cities currently we need new financial models. We need new investment funds, because the cities we have to do a lot of things. We don't have enough money to do that. For that we need new models, and also we need urgently change the regulation for do that. Okay.
Thank you. One question there.
Hi, Sasha Meckler from Analysis Mason. So what I've heard so far in terms of the financing that you've done is ways of financing newer technologies or smarter technologies within existing verticals within cities. To my mind, the big question around smarter cities is how all of these different verticals, transport, water, energy, and then the different aspects of all of those interact and use data and more modern techniques to work together. Now, the problem in terms of financing some of those things is, as one of the speakers pointed out, is he said it's very important to have a clear view of exactly what the city's going to get. The problem is if you are investing in these technologies that interoperate across existing silos, you don't know exactly what you're going to get. So I take, for example, the smart metering program in the UK, which is now having a massive issue with its business case, because fundamentally it was very focused just on the metering, just on bringing the meter information back, and not on all the smart grid benefits that would come of it. And because those weren't internalized, they lost all the stakeholders who would necessary to make those benefits happen. And now the fundamental business case is falling apart because it wasn't more forward thinking and wasn't thinking about those sort of intangible things that were very difficult to get financing and to justify. So what needs to happen in the financing system to change that, and what kind of governance models and changes would underlie those sorts of changes so that the financial community could get behind those sorts of things? Because this is something that is endemic everywhere. You know, most of the time we're not really talking about smart cities, we're talking about smart water or smart energy or smart transport. And the real value is how those come together.
You asked about 10 questions. You know, each one could take an hour. So let me think about it in a couple of ways. So starting with the simplest first, I think the benchmarking on the smart applications, benchmarking of the status quo is almost always wrong. When we first did smart water meters in New York City, and I saw the pro formas, they were only about 50% right. They didn't capture how much more quickly we could identify a leak. They didn't capture even some of the long-term labor costs. So getting the benchmark right at the beginning is a critical part of the story. Secondly, there are uses that today drive value, right? And they can pay for some of the platform, right? We know that energy is definable, right? We know some aspects of mobility are definable. We know preventative maintenance is definable. and we know that smart parking produces revenue. So what I was trying to do with Mike Bloomberg, this is now 4 or 5 years ago, but Indiana, the state of Indiana in the U.S. is doing this a little bit better today, which is create a data analytics center in the government that reports to the elected official, that has the responsibility for mining the data across the verticals, because the big solutions are across the verticals. And that means, so if you put those together, then you have to have the use case to make sense of it. But some of that data is not easily commercialized. So I think if you combine the revenue sources from those things where we have an operating model with a data analytics center run out of a relatively high level, we'll begin to see and unlock solutions across the verticals in social services as well as hard services. But we're just a little bit immature in being able to tell that story in a very powerful way.
Couldn't agree more with your point about the integral vision of a city is probably a lot more than the summation of all the silos parts, no? What we're seeing that might make some sense and that might be a step forward is institutionally to try to have, you know, an innovation department and a smart technology director, you know, someone in the city who's able to have the responsibility for everything that is going on that particular front, not just on mobility or on energy or on water, but looking at the city as a living creature, no? As a living cell with an integral vision, which is, by the way, is part of what José Antonio does at Santander. One more? Okay.
Yes.
We have 5 more minutes, so we can take some more questions.
The crisis who is coming in Latin America, in different countries in this moment, like Brazil or Ecuador, will be a problem or an opportunity for the PPP projects?
I'm going to answer a very almost straightforward, almost emotionally. I think both. It's going to be a crisis first, but huge opportunity. I have no doubt. I mean, what we were saying here when the gentleman asked the question on the financial access, I mean, the large metropolitan areas, you know, the Bogotas, the Buenos Aires, they're fine. All the others, but that's where the growth is. So eventually, the local governments, the national governments, developing institutions like yourself are going to act together and be able to really get the financing there. I mean, potable water is going to be needed. It's not, Armageddon is not going to come. We're going to get better before that happens. So I think it's a lot of opportunities. But I don't know if from an investor point of view, what Arturo would say, or Kristtian from
Yes, well,
his
I think I mentioned in my previous talk that I see the public and private partnership as probably the best model for developing new infrastructures for all the transport, energy, water, and all the needs of city and citizens. So I believe that there's room for that. That is a great opportunity in those countries you mentioned.
No, I fully agree with Ellis. I think this is an excellent, good opportunity for us to promote the private sector role in Latin America, especially in some specific countries. No, to be honest, I think not all the countries will be open to receive the private sector in some specific areas, like water or waste management, no, like Bolivia or Nicaragua in Latin America. But in the medium term, I fully agree with Ellis. All the countries will need private sector intervention in these issues to solve the urban infrastructure issues.
Middle-income markets like Colombia, like Brazil, like Mexico, like Argentina, like Chile, has no other option. It's going to come. Now, you have to be patient, and you cannot have high blood pressure. Wait, one more, 2 more, here.
Thank you, Nick Elford from UK. So you mentioned the scale of these projects needs some fairly tight management right across from selecting through to delivery and running the programs. What emphasis do you see investors looking to your organisation as sort of managing agents a lot of the times as in terms of project controls? Are they looking to some assurance of guarantees on their finances, visibility, transparency in contracting and that sort of thing? Will that determine where they're going to put their money and in which cities a lot of the time? To the panel, really.
Are you referring to institutions like development institutions, or are you referring? Okay. I mean, one has to make a distinction between, a commercial bank who's looking for the right risk and return equation, and development banks who are looking more for economic impact, reducing inequity and poverty. So in the case of a development bank, my straight answer would be all of the above. When we get involved in a particular project, financing a private sector concession, we tend to behave like any other commercial lender. Probably the difference is that we probably tend to understand much better the risk of that particular country, of that particular city. I was using the example of the water treatment plant and the financing being based on a promise to pay 100 pesos for a cubic meter of water treated. This is a 20-year agreement, 20-year contract. It's probably our election, our mayor's period are 4 years, so you're probably looking at 5 different periods. Let's say in period 3, a new mayor comes along, doesn't get along with the private sector contractor, don't want to pay the 100 pesos, want to pay only 50 pesos, and then, the project starts in risk of being in default. We tend to manage better those risks. We have access to the Minister of Finance. We can talk to them and say, hey, listen, your new mayor in city XYZ is not really behaving as it should be. If he wants to reduce this, there's a clause in the contract that he can call in and negotiate and this and that and the other. It might take some time, but we tend to mitigate that risk through those actions. Maybe you want to add something?
No, just to complement Ellis' comment, I think it's very important to understand also the impact of the project. At the end of the day, our main goal is to reduce the poverty. So the idea is in the case of IFC or World Bank is the same condition like Ellis has mentioned, but also it's very important to understand what is the impact of the project in terms of, for example, the reduction of GHG emissions in the city, the reduction of poverty, and how we can help the municipalities to improve some specific conditions in the city, in the region. So in terms of, in summary, in terms of financial statements or financial analysis is the same for all the development banks, but it's also important for both to understand the impact, the final impact of this project.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This has been an excellent session. As you can see, there's a huge opportunity out there in terms of the second and third tier cities, accessing financial markets, both from an PPP point of view, but also in terms of just advice and financial consultancy, etc. Please, we had 4 excellent panelists with us today. A round of applause for them. Thank you very much. Enjoy this wonderful and beautiful city the rest of the week.